Hello, my name is Kaylee Schnack, and I'm here to complete EDL 901 Module 3, Advocating for Technological Equity. So I'm synthesizing the articles. I'm just going to kind of go briefly through some of my notes. You can kind of see what I've written down. One of the big quotes that I took away was technology is not just a tool. It must align with the needs of the student, the curriculum, and the teacher's goal for learning. They talked about the NEPT and how when you're going in to adopt such initiative with technology and all of that, it's like curriculum. You need to go all the way in, invest fully. So installing, all the apps that need to be happening, or making sure that you have chargers, making sure that you have that longevity, making sure you have licensures for the following year, or like 5 years in advance. Budgeting for devices is smart, but you also have to make sure you have all the other pieces that go with technology and continue that maintenance. Students can't become great composers without having anybody to train them. And they kind of talked about that with the piano. If you bring in a piano, nobody's going to know how to play it unless you're teaching them that. And the same with, technology. The next article was just how to access technology and create equity in schools. It's a must commitment access for all. We talk specifically with the road trip in a car with no road. So you get a car, you're ready to go on this road trip, and there's no road. That's like giving a kid an iPad and saying, okay, I want this paper written size 12 font, and all of these layouts, but you haven't given them any guidance. It's our goal, or it's our job, to provide all of that. I'm kind of going through and looking, and I think of when I had to teach remote, it was very terrifying for me. I was pregnant with my son, and so I got the lucky straw, and I was like, okay, I'm going to teach 3rd grade remotely. It's going to be great. No, Mrs. Schnack, you're going to be teaching 2nd through 5th grade remotely, reading science, social studies, math, and specials. I was 5 months pregnant. It was absolutely terrifying. But I was able with my principal and administrators to, get myself in professional development, find ways to support the students. They were all provided internet access, and I was able to take risk, which was very helpful in my personal example. The next article that we talked about was defining equity in terms of technology accessibility. So the goal of learning and technology is to provide all learners to have the opportunities for long-term success within their academics. So specifically, they're talking about understanding and applying what's in the learning environment. So if your students are on 504s and IEPs, there are accommodations and modifications that you can do with technology, and we need to know how to utilize those to best support all learners. So whether that's text-to-speech, extra time, support, there's also, extended due dates, timelines, I already said text-to-speech, sorry, captions, assistive tech, just the usability of the technology. Making sure that all students are represented regardless of disability, gender, race, culture, ethnicities, and then making sure that, you can change the speed of, when text is reading, you can zoom in and out, you can change the voice, and then universal design, being able to present things in different ways, whether that's audio, whether it's text, video, and letting students, show mastery. Maybe they can create a PowerPoint, maybe they can just, do a Q&A, maybe they can just, write a paper. There's all these different ways that we can utilize technology to assess students' mastery level. The next article is Digital Equity Act of 2021. And this basically talked about how many Americans are in the low income population, and they don't have the broadband, the device to support that. And so the NTIA supplied two grants specifically to support that. One was the Building Capacity Grant, which gives annually $125 million to 50 states. For all 50 states to implement digital equity plans. The other one is the Sparing Target Action, which is also an annual $125 million competitive grant to provide digital inclusion projects. And then the last part they talked about was supporting research and evidence and based policymaking. So working with local, state, and federal levels to find what project will be most effective to reaching low-income population. This is the Fairfax County Public Schools. They specifically just talked about the student's job. The student's job is to follow the rules, learn the expectations, how to work with adults to, design that personalized learning. Then they talked about staff responsibilities. Staff is the go-between from home and school. They're making sure that we're using appropriate behavior, modeling digital citizenship, and continuing to get that professional development support for students. Parents, their roles are to be active in that digital life of their child, modeling appropriate behavior and working with the school to address inappropriate behavior. It's not just one person's job. Everybody works together as a team if we're going to fix that issue with equity and technology. The next article was what role can students play in success of technology and improving quality? So there are 4 ways they talked about it. Assess administrative policies. Do they support or hinder reform efforts? Identify student behavior patterns and usages of resource to determine investment. Evaluate outcomes of academic interventions to improve their effectiveness. Connect students to scholarships, HIPs, or leadership opportunities. Technology is not about helping students who are not doing well. It's about providing equal access and support to participate in rewarding educational experiences and opportunities. So you have to be consistent. You have to make sure that you're checking in and making sure that these experiences and pathways are supporting the future generation. I tend to tell my students that in our class. I'm like, you guys have to learn these things. It's not just because I'm trying to pick on you. It's because you are the future of, the United States. It's scary to think about, but they need to know these things. So that way our world can continue to go round. The next article is equity-centered approaches to educational technology. So making sure that we're prioritizing equity-centered approach in educational technology. Educators and researchers need to get that leverage of technology to move forward to make equity-centered approaches. Policy makers, designers, and researchers have routinely attempted to use digital technology to address learning needs, but there's a marginalized population. Educational technology centers in the innovation and effectiveness of efficiency and promise of quick fix to systematic entrenched educational problems. So this is just more of a research study. I just found that it was kind of fascinating on the history of where we are, where we've been, and where we are. The next article was Action for Digital Equality. And this one specifically talked about we have the responsibility to elevate learners, especially those who are disproportionately impacted, and the resources necessary to engage in blended learning and gain vital skills to participate in digital economy. So we need to bridge that gap between technology and educators, making sure that we have that transformational education, keeping learning with boundless. So, if a student's at home, they'll still be able to learn. If a student, decides to travel to another state, they can still learn. Policymakers, practitioners, and industrial providers need to keep equity at the forefront of their practices. This article was talking specifically about how we need to bridge that gap to support all, but we all have our little ideas and our little jobs. And so when we work collaboratively, we also need to make sure that we're keeping that, the equity portion of that in the front of our brain. I kind of spaced a little bit, my bad. The next part is technology can be a powerful force for educational equity if we want it to be. So this specifically talked about technology can be a powerful force for educational equity if we want it to be. We need to make sure that we're fostering student ownership of learning, differentiating and personalized instruction, and making teaching and learning more accessible. We need to challenge equitable technology access so it can be solved. And we need to focus on that digital divide spectrum so we can know where we are and move to solve problems. And educational stakeholders are vital to maxing ed tech. Teachers are determined to bring learning engagement levels. So that was what that one specifically talked about. The next one was achieving digital equity means tackling tech poverty. So again, talking about that digital divide. 1/3 of the world's school-age children, 463 million students. I was just blown away that have no access. I didn't really think about it. Again, you're just kind of in your own little realm, and sometimes you don't think of the other things that can be impacting. And then we talked about tech poverty. And I just loved this little graphic that they had here. The pandemic exposed our inequalities before it began. We just need to be knowledgeable of that divide and make it our top priority for companies and governments to get that digital equity. I didn't really think of how much it affects our economy by $130 million a day when we're losing if we're not getting to these children. And then they talked about the HP and what they're doing to support the poverty and get the tech to where they need to go. I just thought that article was very interesting as far as what tech companies are doing, because sometimes you don't hear about that type of stuff. The next part was defining a digital equity. So again, we're talking about the digital divide, the impacts of low income and rural students. Digital equity and digital inclusion must be integrated into the vision to fully realize the equitable education for all students. So they just talked about, making sure that we have that inclusion, and that district leadership has the conversation that matches their vision to their teaching and learning, and avoiding those equity gaps. So that was what that article talked about. I feel like I'm having to go fast, and I apologize. There's just so much I want to share. The technology leadership forecast, I pulled this graphic because I thought it was really smart as far as like what they were talking about with the role of the IT control shift, the great experience, the revenue, driver's seat, the security investment, and the competing for IT talent. They talked about having an IT person in the boardroom. I did not know what UX meant, and so I had to look it up, and then I was like, oh, user experience, that makes sense. So with the rise of user experience, having that product mindset, thinking over cost over center, investing in security, and competing for talent. Tech is always going to be here, and we need that support. So it was just interesting to see from the tech side what they believe is important and how we can work together to build that camaraderie. Equity isn't just about technology, it's about supporting students and families. This is another article we talked about. I was totally thinking of the Texas district that couldn't track thousands of students, and they couldn't connect with them at all. And that was a big thing for teachers, is we need to connect with our students, whether that's a picture, whether that's a video, whether that's an email, because learning is essential. So we want to make sure that they're socially, emotionally okay, but we also need to make sure that they get the opportunity to learn. And they also talked about, if you can't get iPads or you can't get tech to them, learning packets and other resources are helpful too. And they expressed Seesaw, Google Classroom, and Flipgrid to connect, especially during that pandemic time. The next part was School Leader Digital Learning Guide from the U.S. Department of Education. Effective use of technology can address the impact and the learning losses experienced by students in the current environment and mitigate the prospect of future learning loss. So they just specifically just talked about, how can we not have that learning loss, and how can we go and move forward to that. And I just kind of pulled off some of the things that they talked about with their guide in order to support bettering things for our students. New standards for leaders focus on equity and digital citizenship. This one I definitely thought about how technology is the leverage point needed to bring global and diverse ideas together. We talked about equity and citizenship advocate, being a visional planner, empowering leader, system designer, and connect leader. So we need that professional learning hub for standards. We need to make sure that we're using these key ideas, when we're going and we're looking at equity in our district, so that way we can form digital citizenship for our students. The next article was Now is the Time for Digital Citizenship and Education. This one specifically just talked about, having that awareness about COVID-19 with students, that they can share things and it won't always be true, and that we need to train our students to use appropriate behavior and not just blast something on there because they saw it and thought it looked good. Especially like Wikipedia. I know I talk to my kids a lot when we're doing research projects. Wikipedia is not always a resourceful research page. We talked about making sure we have professional development, we have family resources for digital citizenship, that we're collaborating with each other and we support each other, and we just build on what we already know. So that was that article. Then the next one was student teachers get creative and address digital equity. So this was interesting because they talked about how much time students are outside of school and the percentages. And then we talked about